Welcome to the Social Mission Revolution.
Each week we explore some of the greatest undertold stories of businesses and everyday people who are making their ultimate impact on the world through social mission. This is Social Mission Revolution,
And this is your host, Andrea Putting.
Welcome to another episode of the Social Mission Revolution. And I'm here today with my special guest, Peter Wilson from Determined 2. And I'm thrilled to be able to speak to Peter because I first connected with Peter when I was writing my first book, Awaken Stop Leadership, and I had an opportunity to speak with him about his leadership style. And in that I learned a lot about his business, which is very... very innovative and has a lot to offer, and we'll talk a bit about an award he just won very soon. But first of all, welcome, Peter.
Good morning.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Determined 2?
Well, I was waiting for you to give the explanation around what we do because it's one of the hardest things to actually get out in words. So I'm glad you struggled as much as I do. So Determined 2 is a company that was started by myself and with the help of my wife and family. Primarily, we started the company for the service that we wanted to develop, and that became known and is known now as Immersion Therapy. So Immersion Therapy is basically a reinvention of what people might recognise traditional scuba equipment might be used for. And so we create a service where people are able to go underwater and breathe underwater on scuba. But the purposes of that is to have freedom of movement, exercise, opportunities, but most importantly, just to have fun.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. More as we get through and talk more about what that's about, that'll be very interesting to people to hear about. So before we get into that, I'd like to ask you my question that I ask everybody, is if there was just one thing for you to fight for, what would that be?
It's a pretty tricky question to answer. And I guess I'm going to answer this as me, the individual, Peter Wilson. And, this is an ever-changing answer to your question because I guess it depends upon what stage you are in your life. But for where I am at the moment, I think it's about living life, really understanding the purpose for me as an individual and make sure I'm nurturing the behaviours that go with living life to the fullest for whatever that means for the time that I'm living in. Didn't really answer your question, did I?
Living in the moment.
I think so, Yeah, I think so. I spent a very long time of my life putting so much importance on what I did as to who I was. And, a few years ago, I was forced to abandon that thought and just let it be. And, that's probably where my life changed dramatically for the better. So I've kind of been living in that philosophy ever since, which is, more important than what I do is what I enjoy, and who I am as a person directly connects to my purpose and vision. And, that's well beyond what I do day to day, that's for sure.
Yeah. So let's go through I want to explain a little about how the process of you getting to where you are, the story behind that, and then we'll go into what the immersion therapy is all about, because I think the story that you begin with, of what started that, is really important.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot. In most cases, the underlying thing we have to face in life is fear. And the things that we're fearful of, we generally come up with lots of different excuses as to why they're not relevant. My life's been quite an interesting journey from a young age, but probably some of the catalysts leading to the big change that I've had more recently was a very serious accident that I was involved in 2007. I was riding a motorbike and lost control of that while I was at work. The accident left me in a pretty bad way. I was run over by a car and wasn't expected to make it through. So certainly remember my wife meeting the ambulance at the house, the hospital, sorry, not the house. That would have been weird if they took me home. Yeah. And, saying goodbye. There was a lot of really clever doctors that saved my life that night, but I certainly wasn't out of the woods. And the next day, my children, which at the time were 5 and 18 months, came in and said their goodbyes. And I was in that situation for about 2 weeks, with about a 20% survival rate. And some point through there, they made the decision that I was probably going to make it, and needed to come to terms with probably some of the longer term impacts of the injuries that I sustained. And one of those might be that I may not walk. But I could wiggle, by that time I could wiggle my toe, and I figured, well, if I can walk, if I can wiggle my toe, I'll certainly walk. So it took me about 12 months to get back on track, upright. And again, this is where we hang so much the importance on what we do. For me, it was about going back to what I considered normal life, really rejecting the idea that life was never going to be the same after an incident like that. And, it didn't matter what I tried and how much I forced things to happen. By 2015, it had all gone a little bit pear-shaped, and got myself in a position where I didn't really think life was worth going on with. So 2015, I was at a bit of a crossroad. It was either start making some different choices about life, about what I was doing in life and what that meant to me, or I seriously contemplated removing myself from life. And, it's quite hard to talk about mental health and suicide and those sorts of things, but I think it's important. Like you said, it's an important part of this story for me personally. And probably, the thing I feel most sorry about is the damage that I caused to my wife and family through that period. So desperately trying to get my life back on track that it was at any cost. And not realising how much baggage I brought with me through my younger years into my adulthood as well. So kind of in that moment of contemplation, I had to decide left or right. And if I was going to go left, that had some consequences, and if I was going to go right, that had some consequences or some actions that were required by me. And one of those was just having to let go. And I seen an image a year or so afterwards, and it was an image of a hand holding onto a piece of rope, all bloodied and cut, and it said something quite simple, like sometimes holding on does more damage than letting go. And I think that's the thing. We have this fear of being able to just let go and trust ourselves and trust the universe and trust that if we find our connection to life, that everything will be okay, even if there in the moment we don't see it. I was quite fortunate to be given a very quick universal message from the universe within half an hour of making that decision, in fact, which was I won a competition for $5,500 holiday, all expenses paid overseas. And it was literally half an hour after I made that decision. I'd made the phone calls, the very difficult phone calls to my employer at that time, and to Amy to say that what was going to be different going forward, which was I wasn't going back to work at that employer, and that I was going to make a change. And, here we are 4 years later.
Yeah. So it is an important message, that whole experience, that a lot of people do go through those times when it just feels like there is nothing to move forward to. So being able to see that on the other side there is that something, and if we let go and trust that we are being guided to somewhere.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and that's the thing. Well, you don't see it. I mean, that's the whole reality. We don't know what tomorrow looks like, and I think that's the mystery of life. I think trusting. I think, like I said, I mean, more important than what you do is the why you do it. More important than what you do is how you do it. I think relying on those principles and just trusting that in yourself and knowing that that's fluid. It's actually okay. There's no such thing as right or wrong. So that's just what it is for that moment. and you can change, you can reinvent. If that doesn't go well, do something different.
Yeah. And then where did you go from there? Because I know where you went from there, but I'd like to be able to share that with the audience, that you've decided to leave your job, but then something bigger had to come in to guide you onto where you were going.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have said this previously, but fortunately, when I was injured, I was at work at the time, so it was something that was protected or covered. My injuries were covered through a workers' compensation scheme, which these days is known as Return to Work SA. And I guess my view of that at the time was it was a pretty abhorrent system and an abhorrent scheme. And it certainly didn't treat me with the individual, what I felt respect and support that I needed at that time. About the same time as I was making those decisions, in fact, a few weeks afterwards, our state in South Australia went through a scheme reform, which reclassified people with workplace injury. And because my injuries were quite significant, in South Australia, it has a capacity of 30% whole person impairment is deemed serious injury, and I had a whole person impairment of 47%. And what that meant was, and I remember thinking at the time when they had a meeting, this is a few weeks after, sitting on that hill contemplating left or right, prior to that, they told me there was no support, and either I kept doing what I was doing or they would cut me off. To just a few short weeks later saying I was now a seriously injured worker and nothing was off limits and there was lots of support for me. I remember actually being a bit shell-shocked, thinking, you got to be joking me. Only just a few weeks ago I was ready to possibly kill myself and there was no support from you at all. And you told me, no options, and now you're telling me a totally different thing. And I remember my first reaction to that was a little bit angry, but also a bit of relief, because it kind of took the pressure off what I was going to do next. And so by that stage, I had this concept, an idea that what I wanted to do had to be connected to the experience that I'd had going through life, which was, after my injuries, I had lots of treatments or services available to me. And I felt like they got me to the best physical capacity that I could be in, but I still wasn't happy with who I was. And I found it difficult to find enjoyment in life. And so I wanted to go and see if there was something that I enjoyed doing, which was Scuba, and blend all the good components out of that and create a service that was more accessible for people for that one intention, which was to get a positive kick out of life. Because I think, if we have that opportunity to feel positive about ourselves, then all of a sudden our view of the world changes and we start to see opportunity, because the reality is it's only our perception of the world. If we view it scarcity and there's no opportunity and everything's difficult, or there's, lots of opportunity and life's worth living and it can be fun, the reality is the world we live in doesn't change. It's just our view of the world. So I wanted to think about the fundamentals of creating a service that could do something like that, because I didn't feel like there was anything that currently existed that did that.
Yeah, and of course you've gone through and done that, and you've just recently won an award, the Social Change Award, which is awesome because you're doing great work with that.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal the last 4 years, ever since we sort of had this idea that we'll kick this company off, and using Scuba would be one way in which we'd do it. And I think those fundamentals about getting those benefits out of services goes far beyond what we do with the Scuba. I think there's two parts going on there. There's obviously the Scuba and what the immersion therapy and what we do underwater is the technical component of what we do and what we offer. But there's also the approach that's applied to that service model in the way that we do business, the way that we have developed our service, the intentions and the purpose behind that. And I think that can actually be applied to any business model, any social business that's working with people. And I think as service providers, we almost have a duty to do that, to make sure that we're empowering the people that we provide services to and not taking away their power. And that was certainly my experience coming through my rehabilitation, was most of the time through that journey, the power was being taken away from me. And in fact, I had one specific memory of an assessment, and the doctor's specific words to me were, "I'm going to do an assessment. My name is Dr. Such and Such. I'm not going to have time to stop and explain to you what it is that I'm assessing. And even if I did, you wouldn't understand what that was." And I remember that was soul shattering because I'd spent 8 years understanding my body and my injuries and how that impacted me on a day-to-day basis for me. Because I had a great surgeon that told me that's how it was going to be for me, that I would be the best, knowledgeable person to understand how my body was different to how it used to be and how it would work effectively now. And I'd only know that by getting out and testing it. And so I felt a real passion towards, if I was going to do something, I had to do it big and exciting. And so I think the Scuba brought that visual element. But fundamentally, it's the approach that sits behind the business as far as empowering our participants and going, actually, you're the expert in your life. Our job, our model, our systems have been developed to learn from you. Therefore, our model and system has to be adaptable to every single person that comes, because every single person is an individual.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that about you, because after having parents go through various health situations, and instead of the doctors or health providers talking directly to, for example, my mother, they would ring me and I go, "Hey, talk to her. Explain this to her and she will make the decision." So they were just continually trying to remove her from the equation, and how disempowering that just felt for her. It's like, well, do I have no control left in my life? And I can imagine for someone who is young and quite mentally vibrant, who's had a physical disability, that they must go through that a lot. And it's so important that they have that empowerment through their control of their life.
Yeah, and I think that flows throughout all humanity, because if you think about the way that we run, we talk about words like, inclusion and, equality. But the reality is a lot of the things that we do in that space are actually exclusive and not equal. And so I've got this book. It's more of a humanitarian view that we all have the right as individuals to be individuals, and we all have rights. Now, some of those individuals may live with disability. They may be culturally different from each other, but the reality is, as humanity goes, we're all one people, and that we should all have the opportunity to be empowered and be recognised as experts in our lives. And I always feel like giving people information is important to be able to make the choices that are right for them, like you spoke about with your family situation. It's about giving people the dignity of choice and the dignity to be informed and make informed decisions.
Yeah, and that's something that I can certainly commend you on for your business. I'm sure that's part of the success in what you're doing. So we explained what immersion therapy really is about and what people experience when they work with you.
Yeah, so when we began, like I said, it was really about just doing something fun. And I guess where we are now is something quite different. It still has the main objective of it. If it has to be fun. If it's not fun for somebody to do, then they're probably not going to continue to do it. Like most things in life, right? If you're not enjoying it, you move on. So, but in principle, we developed the challenge in the beginning was looking at recreational scuba diving and what actually made that so exclusive. And there were a lot of factors around that. There was the cost. It's quite an expensive hobby and sport to get into. Beyond that, the medical restrictions around what deems medically against the standards that we have in Australia around medically fit to scuba dive. There obviously is some fitness requirements if someone wants to recreationally scuba dive. Things like in your open water, being able to swim a certain amount of distance, be able to tread water for a certain amount of time. Those things can be quite demanding physically, and they're there for a reason. It's because ultimately you're going to potentially be out in the ocean with you and one other person under the buddy system, which means you need to be able to have those basic skills if something goes wrong. That's what they're there for. So, and there's a set of medical standards that doctors assess behind that. So it's medically quite restrictive. Also, the environment, the reality is I've been a diver now for about 13 years, and, the opportunities to actually get out and dive are few and far between. We live in South Australia. The weather here is quite unpredictable. So it's not really easy to say, I'm going out this weekend and then do my sport, because there's a lot of, exclusivities around being able to do that. And, if you look further beyond that, things like, being able to get into the water, out of the water, even temperature can be an issue. Quite evidently, the fear of sharks.
That's true.
And it is quite a daunting experience for someone that's not really, really passionate about wanting to do that recreational diving. And I think the seeds that set home for me for that led to immersion therapy was around mid-2015, after like I said, about that crossroads that I was in, and I was kind of exploring what next for me. I was actually in Thailand with my son, who's at the time was a junior diver, and we were diving together. And we were watching these people on the back of a boat in the water look like they were drowning. And I spoke to the instructor afterwards, and I said, what was going on there? And he said, we get it all the time. He said, it's people that are just looking for an experience. They want to get in the water, but, they push themselves to that point of the experience. And that clicked home for me that I thought I could create an experience that was way more inclusive, way more fun, way more inviting, dealt with all of those different exclusions that make something, an activity like that, exclusive. I thought back to the times at home when a lot of family members would look at my photographs and go, oh, those photos are awesome underwater. I'd love to go scuba diving, but there's always a but. And if you speak to a scuba diver, they'll tell you the same thing out of their networks of friends. They'll all say, I wish I want to go scuba diving, but there's always a but. And so, but those people would come around my house, and in our little spa, they'd get in the spa bath, which was about 1 metre deep. And we'd have, a cylinder and a regulator in there for the kids and family to get in and have a bit of fun on. And everyone would have a blast, And I guess for someone that dives in the ocean, they find that they don't really understand. But for us, it was like going, like, it's the experience. It's so much fun to breathe underwater, but it's also so very much daunting and exclusive. So, it was about, could we actually challenge that idea, that business model of what people traditionally would use scuba for? And in the beginning, so I was working with doctors and a dive instructor and those sorts of things to look at what would it actually take to create something new and different. So we started on that journey, and actually, believe it or not, it's funny that we're doing this interview today, the 23rd of the 9th, 2015, so 4 years ago today, was the first time we actually put somebody in the water, which was Ben Everson. So that was actually his 21st birthday as well. So it's a happy birthday to Ben today, because it's his birthday. And that was 4 years ago. So yeah, he'd be 25 today. And that was the first time. And that video is actually on our YouTube channel. And I think any human being that watches that video of Ben and that reaction, that emotion that came from Ben after being in the water on the very first night, that was what cemented it for us, as far as this was the idea going forward. This was the purpose. This was the vision. This is something that I can really connect with about going forward. And so if we fast forward 4 years, we've grown in our popularity. So we literally went from as we call Ben affectionately, the guinea pig number one, to, in that first 6 months, we won the National Disability Awards for Excellence in Inclusive Innovation. And that kind of put us on the map nationally, as far as, a credible service that was establishing. And we're still currently in the startup phase, but it was basically the next year South Australian Community Achievement Awards for Innovation and Leadership in Health. And then we backed that up the following year. We've grown more and more popular. And what's happened with that is we've had more and more people approach our service. And now we've held about 6,000 individual sessions with somewhere around 700 odd individuals. And each time someone comes, like I said, one thing I did want to do was learn from each of those people. Because technically speaking, the doctors are saying what we're doing, no one else has ever done. So we had to learn and capture that information, not just for our doctors, but also for our business model, about how do we effectively repeat what we're doing, so it can actually be scalable. And so what happened was we started having people with far more complex injuries and situations than what we initially started with. And then we started seeing crazy things like people that have never walked on land, either since acquiring their injury or being born with their disability, their impairment, And all of a sudden, in this environment, things of their body started to move. Limbs would move. They could function their body in a totally different way. And that was just mind-blowing. That was not what we set out to achieve in the beginning. Again, like the most important thing is when they get out of the water, they've got this humongous smile on their face. But from a health and well-being perspective, this mobility and this movement that we had no idea was going to happen, just simply because it hadn't been done. And it certainly hadn't been done with the scrutiny and level of credibility that we've put together in our service. So the amazing things that's happened since then is with the doctors, we've got more doctors on board. The University of South Australia are getting the School of Health Science are going like, let's try and find out from an evidence perspective actually what's going on here. And so that's been really, really good. And I think, that blended with the approach that our service has, which looks at, so the physical component looks at a person's movement, that's their physical body and well-being. But I think more important, like we discussed right at the beginning, is their mental perception of the world around them, how they feel. Do they feel empowered? Do they feel in control? Do they feel positive? That comes from the approach. And so we're seeing that true biopsychosocial benefit, which is a physical benefit, a psychological benefit, and a real social benefit.
Yeah. So it's really benefiting. It's a very holistic therapy in that it's benefiting them from their physical right through to their spiritual complex unit of who they are. It just helps them on every level.
Well, it creates the opportunity for them to help themselves. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like people have to take from that opportunity whatever is relevant for where they're at. And I think that's the most important thing is, we say this, like we do good, but we're not do-gooders. We don't do things for people. We create opportunities for people to do things for themselves. And I think that's a real fundamental behind what we do. There's obviously all those different aspects where someone can get an opportunity to benefit, but ultimately it's up to them whether they take that from it or not.
I like that approach too, because it's not about doing things for other people. Yeah, like you said, giving them the opportunity, because that's where people grow and develop and have that empowered experience that, hey, I can do something. And it gives them beyond the physical therapy that you're offering. It gives them that opportunity to think of their life on a whole other way, that if I can do this, then, hey, maybe I can do that as well.
Yeah, and that belief, the thought, I see you doing the thought is so important. Beyond, the visual for them seeing that they can do things that they didn't think they could do, that's just a gateway to the thought of thinking that they can do things that they didn't think they could do. Because more powerful than anything is the thought. And one of the ways that we sort of, when we're working with our staff and, if we're doing mentoring and things like that, so not necessarily in our service, we talk about how important the thought is. And one really simple way that people can experiment with how powerful is a thought is if you visualize or think there's a lemon in your hand, and just think about there being a slice of lemon and then you putting it in your mouth and you sucking on that lemon. So if you go ahead and even think that you're doing that, the thought of what happens to your body.
Yeah, it reacts. It's like the
right.
mouth automatically saliva starts to produce, and you just...
Where's the lemon?
Yeah.
There's no lemon. It's a thought, so the thought is so powerful. And so, again, I think like as service providers or people that provide services to people, promoting positive thoughts is really important in our day-to-day interactions with people, because the thought is one of the most powerful things we have as a human being, transcends our physical ability. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it makes more anything's possible there from there.
It is.
Yeah. Awesome. So what's the award that you just won? I did allude to that before.
So the 2019 Telstra Business Awards for South Australia, the Social Change Maker. So absolutely one of the most prestigious awards in Australia, and certainly in a category that we feel very proud to be recognised in. So an epic achievement for our organisation. equally for all those that have contributed to our success and mostly our participants, because like I said, it's what we've learned from those participants to get to this point, and the model that we've built to continue to learn from those participants as we scale and grow our business globally.
It's an incredible award, and really made me to stop and think again about what I've already learnt about what you do and what I see on Facebook. I'm constantly amazed at seeing people achieving incredible things.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So if you had any advice to give someone who had a thought and thought, well, maybe I can't do that, that seems a big idea, what advice would you give them?
Another poster. I'm a man of analogies and posters. Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, either way you're right.
Yeah,
That'd probably be my response to that.
Yeah. So just
my other one that's quite funny is I've come to the term business is pretty much like life, which is also like a fart. Don't force it because it has unexpected outcomes.
Allow things to happen as they happen.
Yeah, organically, as you say.
Yeah, fabulous. So if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you do, how can they get in touch with you?
So the website is absolutely the best port of call. There's all the contact details, phone, email, but there's also great stories. We've got a blog page, we've got videos, lots of information in detail about the service, the pillars, the foundation behind the service. Yeah, everything's there on the website, determine2.com.au. It's
and it is. I've looked on the website, and like I said, I watched some of your videos and enjoy seeing some incredible things happening.
Yeah, so if some people want to be connected on a day-to-day basis, they could join our social media. That's a real community around our Adelaide operations on Determine2 on Facebook. There's photos and stories literally every single day going up on there from the people doing our service. That's a really cool community. Facebook, we were recently part of the awards asked to, sort of scrutinise some of our processes, why we do things, and around the social media, like why we do that. It's really not a marketing or sales tool for us. The social media, we're quite clear, is something we do for our participants. It's their hub. It's the place to be able to park their photos and stories and images so that they can then share them with others. We do that for them. So yeah, and anyone's entitled to join that community. It's an open page.
And that would help to continue to inspire each other, that they've started off on this journey with immersion therapy and now they're doing something more and something greater, which then inspires each other and works through the... Yeah.
I think there's some cool stories that come out of it. It's not always what people will visually, again, it's about that perception. I could think of a participant recently when we were doing one of the formal reviews, we were discussing sort of their view on what they were getting out of the service and how we support them going forward. And, why visually, this is a person that's quite impaired on land, but underwater has quite a lot of mobility. For someone sitting back, you'd go, wow, that must be really good for them physically. But that person's perspective on what their main benefit is they go out socially and show people in their social circles photos and videos of what they're actually doing underwater, and the social network of the social, the social setting of their friends are just jaw dropped, going, that is unbelievable. And these are people that may not have that mobility issue on land, just going, there is no way you would get me underwater. There is no way that I could do that. And so this person's perception of where they are socially in the world, they said to them, makes them feel like they've come up 3 runs. And the reality is they were never down. It's just, again, it's their view of where they sit socially amongst their peers. And so just that visual ability to show someone and their social friends think more highly of them, it's just so beneficial.
I see that it would also help to change the perspective of those without the disability who may be their friends. and to
Yeah.
have that different perspective of what a disability is about and what people can achieve regardless of their ability level.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this is that thing. It's about inclusion. So inclusion is not about making disability special. It's not about making it unique, because the reality is we're all human beings, and you know, the disability or the injury or whatever the cultural differences isn't what defines us. The way that we live our life and the way that we choose to face whatever challenges come with our personal situation is what defines us as human beings. And you know, so yeah, it's like going, like I said, going out socially or whatever. Accessibility is a massive thing. Like if there's stairs, if there's not appropriate change rooms, all of those things impact on our ability to be truly inclusive. So it's not the person's disability that's making them exclusive. A lot of the time it's our environment around us. And
Yeah.
so like you said, I mean, I think even just bringing it to the forefront so people start to think about things like that, you know, it's really important that we start seeing the person, not the disability.
Yeah, incredible, and a great story to be sharing with people. I'd like to thank you,
Thanks.
Peter, for being on the Social Mission Revolution today. I really have enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for your time. Bye.
And that's all for this edition of the Social Mission Revolution, and I'll be back next week with another Social Mission Revolutionist.
This has been the Social Mission Revolution with Andrea Putting. Join me again next week when we'll speak to another Social Mission Revolutionist who will inspire you on your journey to making your ultimate impact on the world.